Alan Moore. You wrote my favorite issues of Radioactive Man.
Oh, really? So you like that I made your favourite superhero a heroin-addicted jazz critic who's not radioactive?
I don't read the words. I just like when he punches people. How do you make his costume stick so close to his muscles?
Mr. Moore, will you sign my DVD of Watchmen Babies? Which of the babies is your favorite?
You see what those bloody corporations do? They take your ideas and they suck them. Suck them like leeches until they've gotten every last drop of the marrow from your bones.
Hey, Teacup, why don't you chill out?
Very well. Oh, little Lulu, I love you, Lou, just the same.
Thanks, gang, and welcome back to Surrounded by Shortboxes with your boy Stu from Dr. Doom's Fan Club. This is the show where we take a look at my favorite back issues from the personal collection and why I love them so much. And we're doing another sneaky great Alan Moore tale, y'all, unabashedly. Batman Annual number 11, June 1987. The tale herein entitled Mortal Clay, written by Moore with art by George Freeman. Moore is, of course, my favorite writer of all time. We kicked off Surrounded by Shortboxes with a Moore tale, Swamp Thing number 56, My Blue Heaven. Go check that out already if you haven't. We've also covered DC Comics Presents number 85, where Superman goes south to die and runs into Swamp Thing, and the Ink and Insights gang has broken down the anatomy lesson, Moore's famous deconstruction of the Swamp Thing character. Now, Mortal Clay is one of the more obscure chapters in the Alan Moore DC mythos, but I love this issue because it takes a minor villain and turns him into the centerpiece for a haunting, character-driven tragedy. Few single issues capture the elegance, the empathy, and the literary sharpness of Moore working within the shadows of Gotham, quite like this one. And I find the Batman within these pages to be both rare and refreshing. So let's melt it all down and get into what I love about this one so much. As always, first let's set our table and talk about this moment in time and what's going on all around us as this story is being published. As previously confessed, Moore is my favorite writer. I think that without a doubt, he stands as one of the most transformative writers in the history of comic books. A creator whose work has reframed the medium's possibilities and really pushed superhero storytelling forward into literary classic territory. Emerging from the British comic scene in the early 1980s, Moore brought with him a poet's precision, a horror writer's sense of unease, and a precise, meticulously detailed structural rigor to every single project he worked on. Whether reinventing existing characters or building new worlds from scratch, his work blended psychological depth, formal experimentation, and by the mid-1980s, Moore had really elevated comics to a level of emotional and intellectual seriousness without losing the genre's identity in the process. It's this combination of ambition and empathy and craft that makes Alan not just a successful writer, but a generational watershed, one whose influence reshaped the art form from the inside out. So, this annual drops June 1987, and to say Moore is at the peak of his creative powers feels like I'm somehow underselling it still. At this point in time, he was deep into the most pivotal creative stretch of his career when it comes to comic books, functioning as the gravitational center of the industry at the same time. Watchmen was nearing its conclusion in June 1987. Issues 10 and 11 were rolling toward press, with the final chapter arriving later in the year. And this book would cement Moore's reputation as the medium's most structurally innovative writer. He's also, at this time, wrapping up his legendary acclaimed run on Swamp Thing, which he would leave this very summer with issue 64. At the same time, he's also continuing V for Vendetta, which was serialized first in Warrior Magazine and then carried forward by DC Comics, with new installments still appearing throughout 1987 as the story inched towards its completion in 88. We also have Miracleman chapters still coming out on Eclipse Comics. At this point, they're being sporadically published, but Miracleman is still an active project in 1987. So, during this moment in the summer of 87, Moore was closing the book on this unreal run with DC, all while still producing some of the most influential serialized comics, not just of the decade, but really of all time. Here was a writer at the height of both his visibility and his creative powers and influence. As for our artist, George Freeman, he was already a well-respected, versatile Canadian artist by the time he pencils and inks our featured book here. Before this annual, Freeman was best known for his work at Maple Leaf Comics, and especially Winnipeg's Captain Canuck, where he became the defining artist for the character and helped shape one of Canada's most iconic independent comic book titles. And after Batman Annual number 11, he continued to build an eclectic career, contributing to The Warlord and Elvira's House of Mystery. He's got a celebrated run on Black Widow. His later reputation became tied to his strong coloring work and his design chops. He got nominated for an Eisner for Best Colorist in '96. Freeman has solidified himself as one of those quietly essential craftspeople whose work enhances every book he touches, even when he isn't the headline name on it. On colors here, we have Lovern Kindzierski, who is another super accomplished colorist and craftsman with a killer resume. Lovern was also coming out of that vibrant Canadian comics community in the 80s, where he quickly distinguished himself through his work with Aircell and on independent books before becoming a frequent collaborator with artists like Freeman, David Lloyd, and John Bolton. All talents whose atmospheric styles benefited from his rich color palettes. Over the decades, he's become a fixture at major publishers. He's contributed to The Sandman, Hellblazer, Books of Magic, numerous DC Dark Horse books, and he's also earned an Eisner nom for his work on his own graphic novel, Cradle's End. So check that out. All right, now that we got the creative team out of the way, let's talk about Clayface and trace the history of this character from his origins to this particular incarnation. We begin with Basil Karlo, the Golden Age original, introduced in Detective Comics number 40. This is from 1940. Karlo was a horror film actor driven to madness when a studio remade one of his classic movies without him. Donning a monstrous mask, he set out on a murder spree patterned after his old film roles. Basil Karlo establishes the template of Clayface as a figure rooted in identity crisis, performance, and that psychological fracture. Our second Clayface, Matt Hagen, debuts in Detective Comics number 298. This is 21 years later in 1961. And he expands the concept from a masked killer to a true shape-shifting marvel. Hagen's transformation, which granted him full body malleability thanks to a pool of mysterious protoplasm, makes him the version most associated with the name throughout the Silver and the Bronze Age. All right, now to our boy, our third Clayface, Preston Payne. He arrives on the scene in Detective Comics number 478 and radically deepens the character's tragic potential. I gotta say here, y'all, I thought this was really cool. We have another Len Wein, Alan Moore connection. Len Wein and Marshall Rogers create this character, Preston Payne, in Detective 478. Moore follows up and builds upon the character, much like he was already doing to celebrate his success with Swamp Thing. Another Len Wein creation. All right, so in Detective Comics 478, Payne is a brilliant scientist malformed by a medical condition, and he attempts to cure himself using Hagen's mutated tissue, only to become a melting, highly volatile being whose very touch dissolves living flesh. His desperate spiraling psyche became the backbone of his canon, particularly after he constructed a mannequin he named Helena, believing she was his one true love, a detail that would become essential to the character's identity and our story today. Moore's story builds directly on Wein's foundation that was set in Detective Comics 478, using Helena and Payne's fragile emotional state to deepen that pathos and psychological complexity of the villain who, up to that point, really just lives on the fringes of Batman's rogues gallery. All right, I'd be remiss if we're talking about Clayface for me not to mention one of my favorite representations of the character. His reinvention in Batman the Animated Series from 1992. This was the turning point that really permanently altered the character's cultural footprint when we're talking about modern times. This wonderful show merged elements of Karlo and Hagen and Payne into this single, richly tragic figure, a disfigured actor manipulated by a corrupt corporation, driven into a meltdown, literally and figuratively, once these experimental chemicals that he was taking destabilized his form. Episodes like Feet of Clay showcase the full pathos of a man dissolving into something monstrous, while still clinging to his memories, to his ego, and his longing for the life that he lost. The series' cinematic animation, Ron Perlman's killer vocal acting performance, that noir-infused emotional weight really elevated Clayface from a B-tier villain into one of Batman's most iconic tragedies. So definitely check out those episodes if you haven't already. From that point forward in 92, nearly every modern version of Clayface has adapted the animated series tone. It blends that horror, that heartbreak, and that humanity. And it's really helped to cement him as one of Gotham's most empathetic monsters. All right, gang, we've covered the creative team. We've covered our moment in time. We've covered Clayface. Let's dig into Batman Annual number 11. A quick cover note here. John Byrne handling cover duties on this one. We're talking about artist and creative powerhouse mode at the time. Byrne checks that box. June 1987 finds him a year removed from his legendary run on the Fantastic Four. In the year since his time with the First Family over at Marvel, he has come to DC and completed a monumental reinvention of Superman for Detective Comics with Man of Steel. And as of June 87, he is deep into his runs on both Superman and Action Comics at the time, redefining the mythology, the tone, and that visual identity of Supes in the post-crisis era. So shout out John Byrne, another artist really working with crazy momentum at the time. We open our tale with Preston Payne and Helena seated together in what appears to be domestic bliss, watching All in the Family. But as Preston, who's our narrator throughout the entire story, as he cracks open a cold one, we see all is not as it seems. Things have changed. Has his and Helena's love grown cold? Where did it all go so wrong, right? So they're setting us up for the flashback. And from there, we get a nice little one-page recap of our last misadventure in the aforementioned Detective Comics 478, in which Payne and his temporary domestic peace with Helena in a house of wax all ended horribly. After tangling with Batman, Payne calls him the man in the cloak. The wax museum caught fire, and desperate to save his Helena, Payne had ran back into the flames. We see here in the annual that the museum overlooked the river, and when he was unable to find his true love, Payne had jumped into the water to avoid the flames. So, quote, burned, half drowned, and dressed in crimson tatters, end quote. Our version of Clayface makes it to shore and heads back into Gotham, desperate to once again find his Helena and rekindle what they once shared in that ill-fated house of wax. So finally, after weeks of searching the city, he finds her, where else but dressed to the nines and right there in the window at Rosendale's. Quote, isn't that just like a woman, he asks us, after this glorious reunion. Now, Preston Payne hides inside Rosendale's, this department store, during the day, waiting for night to fall and the store to close so he can be with his Helena again. Quote, in an unforgiving city, I had found redemption, he rejoices. But nothing good ever really lasts now, does it? At first, the situation is ideal. Things are great. After Helena gets transferred up to ladies' evening wear on the 12th floor, old Preston takes up residence in the bedroom furnishings on the floor beneath hers. Hiding during the day, at night they are free and unbothered, besides the occasional security guard to look out for. Under that cover of darkness, Preston's preparing lavish meals inside this Bayview restaurant for his love. Together they dine, their eyes only for each other. They even visit and spend time with friends. They're getting intimate. But I just gotta say, the way Moore treats this relationship with respect is so endearing. He could have easily made it a joke, a sad, delusional villain loving an inanimate object, but he doesn't fully commit to that. He doesn't treat it as comedic or grotesque. It's there in a sense, sure, but really this is a man desperately crafting a simulation of normalcy and trying to find a life-size placeholder for his companionship. Helena is all stiff and plastic, and she's really a mirror of Preston's own condition, trapped in a body, unable to move toward the life that they want. And I love how Moore's narration walks that razor-thin line between sweetness and manic horror. When Preston dresses Helena and poses her and feeds her, it all feels like a ritual. It's tender, it's intimate, it's wrong, but Alan's genius is that the sadness always outweighs the discomfort. You're unnerved, and rightly so, but you're also heartbroken for this dude who simply cannot be touched. Things start to get rocky in the relationship when one morning our boy wakes up and he finds out Helena is gone. He starts searching frantically. He finally finds her, and where does he find her, y'all? In the lingerie section. Oh no. Stunned and heartbroken to this reveal, Preston stumbles back to bedroom furnishings. Man, he is not ready for that, right? The next night, Helena is back, and she's dressed appropriately, and neither one speaks to the other about the absence, right? We're just going to act like that didn't happen. That little wild foray. But this plants seeds of doubt in his mind, and soon enough, he spots the security guard stealing the scarf off of Helena. And he's whispering in Helena's ear as he's doing this, trying to justify his crime, right? There's nothing wrong with this. I'm just trying to do what I can do for my wife on my salary. But the intimate manner in which he performs this theft gives Preston pause. Big time. And as this guard is whispering all these sweet nothings to Helena, our boy's migraine worsens. Ruh-roh. So not wanting to upset Helena and, murder this dude in front of her, Preston follows the guard into another portion of the department store. And when he hears Preston and demands to see his hand, man, we get Clayface for the first time in the issue. He assaults the guard brutally and then obliges his request. He ungloves his hand and gruesomely murders this security guard by dissolving his flesh. And quote, after that, the migraine vanished completely. I love that bit of narration right there. He takes what's left of the security guard, dumps him 5 blocks away under the cover of darkness, returns to Rosendale's and his wife, and he hopes things are going to return to normal after this wild turn of events. But Preston soon becomes sullen and disappointed when that does not happen. Helena seems distant now, and later on, when he reads an article about the discovery of the security guard's body, he hides it from her. He doesn't want her to know. But her distracted gaze at dinner one night confirms his worst fears when it reveals the bat signal lit up in the night sky over Gotham, and the possibility of the man in the cloak showing up again and ruining everything really, really unnerves Preston. He cannot bear another repeat of events like last time at the Wax Museum. So, Jim Gordon and Batman's combined detective work tell them that the security guard was murdered by Clayface, and being that he worked at Rosendale's, there's a good chance he's still in the store. Batman enters Rosendale's to confront Payne and bring him to justice. I gotta say, I love the shot of Batman here, kind of pulling his gloves on, going to work. And I love Freeman's Batman throughout this issue. He's got this very grounded, weary presence to him, and his line work gives Bruce this big, strong physicality that feels human and necessary, but it doesn't lose that imposing silhouette that you need that really kind of defines the character. Love it. He finds a fine line between vigilance and vulnerability. I think that's a perfect match for the story's tragic and introspective aesthetic. Batman enters the store and he eventually gets ambushed by Clayface. Batman tries to talk him down at first, but Payne's rage at the Batman seemingly being in league with Helena and trying to bring all this crashing down, that cannot be assuaged, right? I love the dialogue here as he rants to Bats. Did you laugh at me, you and her? I must have been a great source of amusement to you. Look at Preston. Look at the cuckold. Isn't he funny? All right, I laughed here. I definitely laughed here. Preston's hell-bent on hurting Bats here, and he is successful. He ungloves himself and burns Batman on the shoulder before Bats can get away down the elevator shaft back down to the 12th floor. There, Batman takes to the rafters and gets the literal drop on Payne, and a great action sequence. Moore's action has always been super sharp. And I love this panel of the bat boots landing on Clayface's head, and then that brutal second head bounce just for good measure. Love the woo Batman lets out as he moves to handcuff Payne. Okay, big fella, it's all over. But no, it ain't. Payne awakens, kicks Batman through the wall, wanting revenge on this dirty homewrecker. And he's got the dazed and confused Bats right where he wants him, barely conscious in his grip, when suddenly he feels the eyes of Helena upon him. And she's smiling? Thinking that Helena is taking some enjoyment from all this mayhem and having two men fight over her affections is the last straw for Preston. He breaks down in front of her, wailing about how she was never worth it. And how has all this gone so wrong? And here, this is my favorite moment in the comic. Batman, full of empathy and understanding, offering a hand to Clayface and saying, Preston, let me help. Next page, we see Preston and Helena, as we did on the first page of our story, watching sitcoms and apparent domestic wedded bliss. But there's that undercurrent of violent instability to it all with Payne's unnerving narration. When I said I wanted her to live with me, he explained things to the doctor and they said okay. He tried. Too bad it didn't work out. Oh, I suppose we can tolerate each other enough to live together, and neither of us wants to be the first to mention divorce. But the love's all dead. Her habits and snobberies grow increasingly irritating. I long to be rid of her, but I can't bring myself to do anything. Each day she becomes older, more dowdier. Never mind. One day I shall be free. After all, she can't live forever. Despite that insidious final note, this ending of Mortal Clay really lands with a quiet aching grace for me. As Batman, so often that immovable force of judgment here chooses compassion instead of condemnation. After witnessing Preston Payne's fractured devotion and that raw tragedy that's really at the heart of his condition, Batman doesn't meet him with the fist of the fury. He offers him help, he offers him shelter, and he offers him a small measure of dignity. Sets him up in Arkham with a Helena in that arranged room where the two can exist without causing harm to the outside world. And it just feels like one of those rare moments in Gotham where empathy for your fellow man outweighs fear. Where the Dark Knight becomes not just a protector of the city, but a caretaker of its broken souls, what he really needs to be. I love that shift in tone. It's refreshingly gentle in a book that's really dominated by darkness, and a reminder that Batman's greatest strength isn't violence, but his capacity to see the humanity in even the most horrific of monsters. I love this issue because to me it's fearless. Rejection of expectation. It refuses that easy moral framing of villains. Moore asks us to sit with that discomfort, to empathize with someone who's dangerous and delusional and deeply alone. It expands what a Batman villain story can be. When Batman finally appears at the end, it isn't as a protagonist. He's a grim reminder that Preston and his world is collapsing. Batman's kind of a figure of order encountering a human being whose internal order has dissolved beyond all repair. And the ending is devastating in how quiet it is. There's no dramatic redemption really, or heroic sacrifice, or poetic justice. It's just a man who tried to manufacture the one thing he needed but couldn't hold on to. Love slips through his fingers, literally and figuratively. I love Mortal Clay because it proves that even the most forgotten corners of Gotham can contain heartbreak worth telling. Another sneaky great Alan Moore tale worth checking out. That's it for me this time, gang. Thanks for watching. As always, make sure you're subscribed to the Dr. Dooms Fan Club channel with those notifications on so you don't miss out on any more great comic book content.
Till we meet again on Doomsday.
What's the matter? Don't you like your new scarf?
Not especially. What a funny way to say hello.
What the hell's going on?
I specifically asked for Batman because I knew I wanted to do something with the image of Batman that hadn't been done for a few years. And so I just asked for any Batman story, and I knew I could put my image onto any Batman story. But this particular one that I got, I was very surprised with.
Why?
Very pleased.
Why were you pleased?
Because it's Alan Moore who's writing this story, who had written this story. And he's the best in the business, bar none. And I thought that people in New York had captured them all, but this one escaped.
Moore's script, called Mortal Clay, came in the form of a 60-page scenario. It was up to George to divide it into the 135 panels that make up the final comic book story. The Batman character has to be recognizable, but the artist does have the freedom to put his own mark on the superhero.
What I specifically wanted to do with Batman was to recapture that expressionist feeling to him, the feeling that he is a larger-than-life person, that he is a real person, but he projects a larger image.